Good morning and welcome from Shropshire. Today is the middle of June and I am going to sow my biennials. So if you've watched the previous video, you'll know how amazed I've been with the biennials this year. So from first time sowing last year, so first time I've ever growing them, other than the odd random foxglove that is just self-seeded throughout the place. It's the first time I've consciously grown them, and boy have I been impressed. It's been fantastic and a real eye-opener. I honestly thought that Wallflowers and Sweet Williams, I'll be honest, I didn't know about Honesty and Sweet Rocket, but Wallflowers and Sweet Williams were the thing of the past, you know, very 70s, very regimented in old gardens, and so I've never really bothered with them. But boy, do they pack a punch. They're fantastic. Now is the perfect time to be sowing them for next year, and so I am going to sow more than I really need for the cutting patch, because I'm going to spread them throughout the garden. They are just providing such a massive amount of colour that the rest of the garden doesn't have at the moment, because it's waiting. The rest of the garden is pretty much perennial, and so it's waiting for the time it needs for those particular flowers, whereas these will fill that gap. So everybody, I don't know whether you know about a June gap, but I definitely have it in the garden. So I have lupins flowering, and I've got some daylilies just about to go in the main garden. And what else is flowering? Bit of geranium, perennial geranium. But that's pretty much it, other than the foxgloves that have self-seeded. So really, what have I been waiting for? So join me on my journey today with planting or sowing some biennials. Biennials are seeds that you sow one year and they take that full season before flowering again. So it's in a year's time they flower, and then that's the end of them. So it's not like annuals that you sow this year, they will flower this year and then they will die once they've flowered. Biennials will sow them this year, they will take all year to grow, and then they will flower next year and then die. So it's kind of a given the way that the name is, and there are quite a few, but certainly not as many varieties as the annuals. So I've never sown them before, but after doing them this year, or sowing them last year and have them flower this year, they are definitely something that's worth doing. So the biennials that I am sowing today are Sweet Rocket. It has just flowered and flowered for at least 3 to 4 weeks. I have taken armfuls of the flower and you just wouldn't know it. It's just been amazing. Sweet Rocket is definitely there to be resown. Honesty. Now, Honesty, I only had one plant. It's very similar flower to the Sweet Rocket, but it flowers marginally sooner. There is a bit of an overlap, but marginally sooner, and it started flowering when the tulips were still out, so actually it was useful as a filler flower then. I actually left it because there was only one flower and I wanted to keep the seed heads. So I am going to try and sow more, and actually I'm going to try and save the seeds from this year's plant and throw them about the hedgerows and hopefully get it to self-seed everywhere, so I don't need to do that again. Because it's for the seed heads that I primarily want it, then if it's in the hedgerow somewhere, then that's fine. I don't need it to waste space in the flower patch. But we'll see how it goes. I will be sowing those. Sweet William, boy, they have been brilliant. I didn't realise how great they were. So I have a mixed variety of those. Now, if you can see in the distance, all of the colour that you're seeing in the distance is Sweet William. The majority of it looks very red, which isn't a colour that I would primarily choose. However, it's fine. It's certainly bright and cheerful. It's a mixed bag of seeds, so in hindsight and in the future, I will perhaps buy specific colours that are more in keeping with my theme. But I've got these seeds now. I'm not going to waste them. I'm going to sow them again. Foxgloves. Now I get these self-sown throughout my garden. I've always had foxgloves, but they've always been, and I'm going to call them the weed variety. So there's a white, which is fine, and there's a purple. And I've never really considered them as being that useful in a flower arrangements because they're just so big. And so everything else around it that goes into an arrangement has to be big. And so they've been a bit for me. However, I've tried these foxglove. They're called Sutton Mix. The ones that I have planted in the cutting garden are definitely a different colour to everywhere else. And they are glorious. They are a beautiful colour. They have had lots of shorter stems that I can use usefully in a flower arrangement. They have got taller ones, so I've let them go tall, and I am going to try and gather those seeds as well when they become seeds. But just in case I can't get that, I am going to definitely sow those again. And I'm going to plant them throughout the garden. So hopefully they can take over from the weed variety, or maybe they'll cross-pollinate and we'll get some new funky colour. Who knows? But I'm going to definitely sow those. And finally, I had hoped to be sowing some wallflowers. However, it would appear that the pack is empty. So I must have used them all last year, put it to the side, and then never reordered. Chilton's sowing instructions say sow late summer for spring flowering or late winter for autumn flowering. I didn't know that. I don't know what I did last year. They are all sown out at the same time as the others, so I didn't think I'd done anything different. However, I can't buy them, so I will be sowing those alongside the hardy annuals later in August. What I need to do is prepare the compost, the seed trays, and then just get sown. It's only 4 varieties. I don't need masses, but I am going to do whole trays of each so I can put any surplus out into the main garden. So what I'm using are the deepest trays that I've got, because my plan is to sow them and leave them in situ for the next 2 months. Where are we now? Mid-June, mid-July, mid-August. Yeah, so maybe planting them out middle of August to late August when there's room in the beds where they need to go. So they need to have enough soil, and I don't want to be messing around with potting up if I can at all help it. So I am planting them in deep compost trays and hoping for the best. I could sow them in the garden. At the moment I do have a bit of space, but I also have, and I don't know whether you can, some seeds that I want to plant out. So the space that I have will be occupied with this year's seedlings. So I'm not going to use up that space with sowing them these biennials direct in the soil. I'm going to put them in the seed trays so I can control what's a seed and what's a weed, so I can recognise it, and also plant them out in the place that I want them to plant it out later in the summer. So first of all, in my seed tray I have put some worm castings. Because they're going to be in the seed trays for quite a few months, well, 2 months, I want them to have as much nutrition as possible in that time. So I want them to be able to grow and flourish in these seed trays. So I've put some worm castings in there, and I'm just going to top it up with multi-purpose compost. So when I'll do that, and then what I then do is soak the seed trays, if you can see over there, soak the seed trays in the water for maybe 30 minutes, and then the compost is then thoroughly damp, and I can then just sow the seeds and leave them as is. I don't want to be watering them once I sow the seed, because that could then disperse all of the seeds to the outsides of the seed tray rather than it being spread evenly. So I like to soak the seed trays first and then sow the seeds. So I need to fill these with compost and then get them soaking. So whilst I wait for those 2 seed trays to soak, I've got one that I prepared earlier. And this one is going to be for the Sweet Rocket and Honesty. Now, I didn't need, the Sweet Rocket turned out to be really quite large plants, and I didn't need as much as I grew. So I am going to only do half a tray of Sweet Rocket. Similarly, the Honesty, and if I'm going to try and grow some in the hedgerows, then I probably only need half a tray of active Honesty, consciously sown Honesty. So they both have the same, they're both similar plants, and they both have the same sowing characteristics, which means they both want to be sown at a depth of 3 millimeters. So I can put them in the same tray easily without too much problem. So let's get started. So firstly, let's do the Sweet Rocket. So that is more than I will need, but I will just sprinkle it on and then thin it out as and when they start germinating. In fact, who am I kidding? That is actually more than enough. So let's put those back in the packet. Let's not waste them. And then label it that side is Sweet Rocket. And then, the seeds for Honesty are remarkably different. So they are quite large seeds compared to the Sweet Rocket. And you'll see them in the seed heads, the round medallion shaped seed heads of the Honesty. They are that size, but easy to harvest, I believe. So I am going to sow these here. Again, I won't need many in the cutting patch itself, and maybe any excess I will plant out. How many have I got there? I can easily, let's just have one more, so I've got a nice even 12. Which should be more than enough for my needs. Right, so they need to be sown 3 millimeter deep. So all I do for that is now just cover them in a compost. I mean, we're only talking in roundabouts, so it's around about 3 millimeter deep. If it was much more, I'd perhaps push them in, but 3 millimeter isn't that much in reality. So there we go. 2 down, 2 to go. Foxgloves are surface sown. So all I need to do is sprinkle them on the top of the compost and then leave them. They like the light to germinate. So it's just a matter of sprinkling. So let me see. But foxgloves are very small seeds. I don't even know how much I've got left. There we go. Not many left. Should be fine. Let's do a random sprinkling of everything. May as well finish the packet. So that, if they all germinate, then that should be plenty. And Sweet Williams need to be sown 6 millimetres deep. So let's see what they look like. So they are the seeds of the Sweet William. Now this is going to be interesting. So I am just going to sprinkle them about because they are quite a small seed. And I had expected it to be a bigger seed so I could just push them down into the soil. Unfortunately, that isn't the case. As they are a mix, I have no idea what colour I'm sowing. I think that's probably... oh, I can fill them out later. You never know, do you? You never know. As they're older seed, I am going to be cautious and plant more than I need. And I will find room for them in the garden, I can assure you. So 6 millimetres deep is quite, well, it's double what we did for the honesty. And the sweet rocket. Seems quite deep for such a small seed, but I will follow the instructions. Okay. So I will now just leave these, water them as and when required, and plant them out again in August sometime. So there we have it. All of the biennials sown up and ready to grow for flowering this time next year. And I have to say I'm really excited about seeing them again. If you're interested in what I grow here in my cutting patch, then watch some of the videos that are coming up in the end screen and it will show you what I do.